Our next speaker, Brad Rogers, was with the Elkhart County, Indiana Sheriff's Office from 1987 until 2020 in the ranks of patrol officer, corporal, lieutenant, and captain. He was then elected sheriff from 2011 until 2018, ending with Indiana's two-term limit. And as sheriff, Brad appeared on Fox and Friends and in an Anderson Cooper town hall as a staunch defender of the Second Amendment and constitutional government. Brad Rogers is nationally known for his role in defending an Amish farmer from federal overreach with the guidance of Richard Mack. Brad is the 2011 recipient of the CSPOA Interposer of the Year Award. In 2020, Brad won the election to defeat a 16-year incumbent for county commissioner. Do we have any other county commissioners here? I think we have one speaking later tonight from this county. So, wow, what a great example. Went from sheriff to now county commissioner Brad Rogers. And he started that office on January 1st, 2021, just last month, after retiring from the sheriff's office. Brad is a retired scoutmaster. Thank you for doing that. I'm an Eagle Scout myself. He and his wife, Susie, have been married 38 years, and they have 3 adult children whom they homeschooled. And Brad enjoys cycling, that's bicycling, hiking, and camping. And please help me give a warm CSPOA welcome to Brad Rogers, Commissioner Rogers.
Thanks, Kirk. Well, it's good to be back here again. Wanted to share with you a little bit. I have 34 years of law enforcement experience, and I actually started out as a peace officer in Texas. 1983, the University of Texas Police in Houston, the medical center, MD Anderson Hospital, and all those, that's where I started, got promoted to sergeant. And then my wife and I moved back to Indiana, where we were originally from, and I joined the sheriff's office there. And so one of the things that ultimately became sheriff. I never aspired to do that, but it just happened through seeing what I could do. So one of the things on my experience is, we're all at different levels of understanding of the Constitution, and especially as a patrol officer, I took the same constitutional law in the academy that everybody else did, and I didn't really think about the Constitution. Oh yeah, I knew that we had to defend Fourth Amendment rights and the Bill of Rights and things like that, but I didn't really take it very seriously. But then I saw things like Ruby Ridge and the Branch Davidian disaster at Waco and Hurricane Katrina and the firearms confiscation, and then as I rose through the rank, and eventually I became sheriff in 2011. And unfortunately, in Indiana, we have a 2-term limit, so that's where I was. That's the system I was in. But on December 1st of that first year of sheriff, I kind of figured, because I knew about Richard Mack, and I knew that a confrontation could possibly occur with state or federal government. And in 2011, that actually happened, and I'll share that with you in just a couple of minutes. I've been a member of CSPOA for quite some time, and they honored me in 2011 with the Interposer of the Year. So let me tell you a little bit about the Office of Sheriff in Indiana. It is a constitutional office, meaning it's in the Constitution, it's articulated there, and it's provided for, with the state law, provides for the duties of the sheriff. In my case, I had about 200 employees, 70 of them were police officers, 90 limited deputies or corrections officers, and then clerical and support staff. And each officer takes an oath of office, as about every place in the nation they do. But it's interesting that one of the things, it's the same way that that Sheriff Henderson did. One of the first things I did as sheriff was I talked about the seriousness of the oath. So when I got hired, I was walked across the courthouse from the jail, and the county clerk told me to raise my right hand. There was nobody there, and I actually signed my oath of office paperwork with a pen with a plastic flower attached to the end of it. And there was no pomp and circumstance associated with it, so I immediately changed that as sheriff and brought about the seriousness of the oath. So I talked about education. I taught the deputies what it was like to be a constitutional sheriff's deputy and why that's important. But today, and even after I was sheriff, the current sheriff continues this tradition, is that we do it in a courtroom with pomp and circumstance. We either have the sheriff or the judge do the oath, and then the new employees have their family members there. The media is invited, and photos are allowed. That's one time. Adoptions and oath of offices are times that in Indiana you can actually take photos in a courtroom. And so that was done, and it, again, shows the seriousness of the oath. So then in December December 1st, 2011, an Amish farmer contacts me. This is the first incident that dealt with interposing with citizens. And you have to understand Amish. Amish don't vote. They say they cast their ballot on their knees. And that's just, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I wish they would vote. That would certainly help. But they don't vote. There was really no political reason for me to get involved in this. I just wanted to protect one of my citizens. And they're very peaceful people. They won't strike even if they're struck, and we rarely have any trouble with them in our county. So I found it unusual that he contacted me. So he said, "Can you come to my house and sit down at my kitchen table and talk to me about that?" And of course, as sheriff, I said sure. So he shared with me how FDA inspectors, the Food and Drug Administration, he's actually a milk farmer, and the crazy thing is, what he was doing was he was farming, milking his cows. He was selling his raw milk to food co-ops, sometimes across state lines. Now, he wasn't breaking any Indiana laws in that, but apparently the feds think that raw milk is not good for you, so they want to get involved in regulating that. So you have to understand that in dairy farms in Indiana, it's actually routine that the FDA would come probably annually to inspect. And basically what the farmer does is they give them consent to come in. Yeah, come on in, do the inspection, and then leave and give me the paper that says I'm good or whatever. Well, this Amish farmer, incidentally, was because he was on the radar of the feds, they were starting to come to him sometimes every 2 weeks, harassing him and just causing a lot of problems for him. They even summoned him to a grand jury in Detroit, Michigan, which is obviously outside of Elkhart County, Indiana. And so remember, I'm meeting with him around December 1st. December 8th was his grand jury, and he was called there by the Department of Justice. So he wanted me to get involved, and I consulted Richard Mack. And I said, being only a sheriff a year, I said, I had a constitutional mindset, but I asked Richard for assistance. He helped guide me through that. So I realized that, I'm from the government, and I have to abide by the Fourth Amendment and the Bill of Rights. Then I expect the federal and state governments to do the very same thing. So I asked the Amishman if he wanted me to get involved. He said he did, and that's pretty brave of him because I knew it was going to stir up a hornet's nest, and he said, let's go. So there was no physical confrontation. There was no SWAT team coming in and pushing the FDA agents out of the dairy farm or anything like that. Basically, I didn't even have their names, so the FDA agents. All I had was the agent or the trial attorney from the Department of Justice, which is Ross Goldstein, which Chris Anhall had a quote of him on her previous presentation. So I emailed Ross and I said, "Greetings. This is the Sheriff of Elkhart County, Indiana, and I understand that your cohorts in the federal level from the FDA are visiting this farmer's property every couple weeks or so and inspecting. And I just wanted to put you on notice that the Amishman has revoked their consent, and I'm putting you on notice that as sheriff of this county, that any further arrival or attempted inspections by FDA agents on this farmer's property without a warrant, signed by a judge based on probable cause, I will have you arrested or removed from this property." As you can imagine, knowing our federal government, they didn't take that lying down. So I got a scathing response from the Department of Justice trial attorney, and as Chris Anhall already alluded to, he wants to talk about the supremacy clause. And so here's what he says, and she kind of referenced to that. "The Constitution of the United States provides that the laws of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, any laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding." Of course, if we're astute, we know kind of what he was missing there. But he goes on, and I'll get to that. He goes on to say, "The United States Constitution, Article 6, the Supremacy Clause, has been interpreted since the earliest days of the nation to mean that federal law trumps state law whenever the two conflict." And then he goes on and he says, "Because it is federal law, indeed an act of Congress, officers or employees of the FDA may do so lawfully without regard to any Indiana law to the contrary," and then I add, "and without a warrant or what the Constitution has to say about this." So he goes on to say, and alludes to the threat, "Refusal to permit entry or inspection as authorized by Section 374 is in itself a federal criminal offense, which under certain circumstances is a felony punishable by imprisonment for up to 3 years." See what he was doing? Yeah. So we'll go back to the Supremacy Clause, and of course, I'm doing much of this is stuff you already know, but just kind of to put the nail in the coffin. The Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, shall be the supreme law of the land. And therefore, only laws made in pursuance of the Constitution become supreme, and regulations, as well-meaning as they might be, could never, nor are they designed to supersede the Constitution. So I had the Supremacy Clause thrown at me. I had the threat of incarceration thrown at me. And then, to knock it all off, I have the county attorney, and he realized that I had sent this letter to the Department of Justice. He goes, "Oh my God, Brad, what are you doing? I'm supposed to protect you." I said, "It's okay. It's all right." In fact, the Department of Justice trial attorney said, "Sheriff, thank you for your letter. Put me in touch with your county attorney." And I sent another email back to him, and I said, "I'm the sheriff of this county. I run this county, not my county attorney." So you have to ask the question, will I stand by while my citizens' rights are being abused, albeit most of the time we protect from criminals, but in this case, we had a government overreach, in my opinion. So what if the feds came after me? And you know, I teach the Constitution to my kids. I stand before them. I stand before God. I stand before my people. And I said, you know, even if I was incarcerated for defending the Constitution, that won't be a fire that would be put out too quickly if the federal government did that to a sitting sheriff. And so I wasn't too concerned about that, but I was willing to take that risk. I don't need to, I'm sure this is stuff you already know, but we have the balance of power. We have legislative, judicial, executive, And then the implications for law enforcement, and that is, I don't check my mind at the door. Remember our founding fathers. Thank you. A reporter once said, well, who made you judge of the Constitution? I said, okay, Mr. Reporter. I said, let's say the state legislature today passes a law that says you can't print what you want in your paper. I said, what would you do? He said, I'd print it anyways. I said, who made you judge? Officers are taught to believe that the oath means that you need to enforce all laws. And we've heard today, and I affirm, that's not accurate. We don't take an oath and say, I, Brad Rogers, promise to write speeding tickets and put bad guys in jail. No, those are all things that sheriffs and deputies can do by law. I get it. But the oath is, I will promise to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. So help me God. So let's look at what happens after this confrontation. December 5th, the farmer receives a certified letter in the mail releasing him from the grand jury. How's that? Now you can draw your own conclusions. Some would say, well, it was the sheriff's involvement. It was they didn't have a good case, whatever. I don't know. I really don't care. And I'm no hero. I was just doing my job. And of course, if you search the internet, especially in the natural food industry, they think I'm some sort of folk hero or something. But it has nothing to do with that. I was just keeping my oath of office. And remember, you don't need a SWAT team to do this. Sometimes you just need some backbone to take a stand. I'm no Mr. Tough Guy. You just need to take a stand and say, no, I'm not going to tolerate that in my county. So I checked before I came to this conference. That was December 1st, 2011. 10 years later, the FDA still hasn't shown back to his farm, and he's still in business. In fact, he's quadrupled his output. So we remain vigilant. And the current sheriff who replaced me was a captain under me. And, there was things like this. They would say something after this incident. They'd say, Sheriff, I've never seen anybody do something like this. But that sets the example for us, and now we're empowered to do these kind of things ourselves. So this next sheriff, also I would consider a constitutional sheriff, he will carry on, hopefully, that tradition. And hopefully that sets the light aflame as an example that will keep going. Now let me tell you about the second time that I got involved in a situation. So we have a neighborhood outside, Elkhart, Indiana is about 50,000 people, and there's a mayor of Elkhart, Indiana. Is no longer mayor. He lost his election. But many years prior, the county commissioners had a deal with the city of Elkhart to extend the sewer system to some neighborhoods out in the county, about 94 homes. And their sewers were failing or something, but there was this deal struck. And through the course of time, there was shoddy accounting or whatever, and the city dropped the ball, and people weren't paying what they were supposed to be paying, allegedly. So the mayor of the city decided, he just unilaterally said, well, we're going to go disconnect these sewers. And you can imagine that would be a real mess. So the neighborhood contacted me, and they said, Sheriff, can you get involved? Well, keep in mind, there's no court order, there's no due process. We have one mayor who says we're going to disconnect these 94 sewers. So on the day of the disconnect, I set my patrol car on top of the disconnect as the backhoes started coming in, and I said, you're not going to dig here. The mayor said, I'm going to send the chief of police out to arrest you. I'm still here today. The chief said, no, I'm not going to do that. So what about due process? We need to make sure there's due process. Now, certainly, if a court had heard this due process and they ultimately issued a court order that says, let's disconnect these sewers, I might have allowed that to happen. But, you know, it was just one mayor, and he backed off. And to this day, they still don't have their sewers disconnected, and they're probably paying what they're supposed to be paying. So, again, a sheriff intervention, the sewers are still connected, and the mayor was defeated, mostly probably because, in large part because of this. So again, a sheriff protecting the citizens' rights. So I go back to the primary duty of the sheriff is to protect people from criminals, protect people from overreach of government, and let's just be a peace officer. I don't need to, going back to, you know, Las Vegas and the Bundy Ranch and the federal government, what they did there. If I get a court order to seize cattle, I don't need a SWAT team with a bunch of guns to get that done. All I have to do is go to the farmer and say, hey, I have this court order here. How can we peacefully resolve this today? And most people would say, well, I respect the sheriff. I'll, you know, do what you need to do, whatever. Anyways, be a sheriff of the people. That's what's important, and that's what will get you reelected. And just remember, keep your oath beyond anything. And I'll tell you, the media doesn't quite understand that. They would continue to interview me, and they'll say, tell us about this oath and why this is so important. And you just tell them over and over again. You just got to hammer it into them because they just don't get it. And but if you stay on point, they'll see that you're consistent. And I don't know, in some weird way, they kind of respect that. So obviously, sheriffs are elected. Sheriff is in a unique situation to interpose. I mean, we're carrying a gun and have arrest authority. So you know, I totally affirm Richard Mack. We want peaceful situations here. And I might add, as a sheriff, I can say this because sheriffs whine about losing their authority. I'm not saying you guys are, but Indiana, they do. They whine about losing their authority. And I say, take it back. And don't fear the federal government. Somebody called me and said, I'm an FBI agent. So, you know, tell me what you want. Maybe I'll help you, maybe I won't. So quit acquiescing your authority and stand up to these people. I'm telling you, they'll typically back down. All right, so there's my contact. I'm now a county commissioner, so I can support the sheriff in the same county. And I'm the commissioners in Indiana are executive and legislative branch of county government. So I hope to continue this oath of office and this line of good role of government. Now we're dealing with this COVID stuff, and I've inherited an ordinance that we were enforcing that stuff. I inherited that. I took office January 1st. Now on Monday, I've finally convinced, because I got to get 2 out of the 3 commissioners to go with me, and I've convinced one of them to say, let's rescind that ordinance. So we're on the road to, again, what I think is a constitutional role there. So feel free to contact me, and email or phone, and very accessible. Thank you. Appreciate it.